Give me a charge of the microphone. Got it?
It's now 4:30. I am going to call the November 13th, 2013 meeting of the Public Service Commission to order. At 5:30, we will stop so that we can have our public hearing with regard to our proposed rate increases. Could I have a motion, please, with regard to the agenda? That's what you do. Have a motion, so did I throw back to a second? Can I have a second, please? All those in favor signify by saying aye. We have a similar motion with regard to the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Bill, are your customers to be heard?
No,
Sir, I like that. It's my understanding with regard to recognitions, and I'm going to go off the agenda for just a moment. It's my understanding that this evening's meeting of the Moorhead City Council, a proclamation will be read that acknowledges the sacrifice of our veterans and those who have served our country in its time of need with regard to military service. And I've been asked by Garland, one of our former commissioners, if we as a commission would consider including that proclamation in our next billing statement to remind our customers and people of Moorhead of the sacrifice that has been given by our veterans. And I would certainly like to do so. And Bill, I understand that you have some additional information as well.
Not really additional information. We will take a look at, doing some kind of insert or something like that in our bill insert. I'm not sure if we would be able to get the entire resolution in there, but maybe an abbreviated version.
Okay.
And then I thought we could look at the Yellow Ribbon campaign as another way to promote that organization as well. So, we'll take a look at that. See if we can.
I would like us to do so, as long as the rest of the members of the commission are in agreement on that. And obviously, yes.
Mr. Norman, I'd volunteer to help you, Bill, if you need any help. I can get some part of that group and a couple other groups.
Okay. Thank you, Les, and thank you to those of you who are watching this evening who are veterans and for what you give. That brings us down to old business. Bill, is there any old business?
No.
Okay. Members of the City Council, I see none. Makes that easy. David? Members of the Public Service Commission, do you have anything to report?
Yes.
Okay, Les?
I don't think we've met since the Economic Development Authority met, did we? I don't think so. Anyhow, part of what the Economic Development Authority did was recommend to the City Council that the city purchase the tax forfeit properties from Stonehill Addition and Johnson Farms Addition, the developed but not yet built upon home sites in those two areas. And I spoke with a couple of fellows that I know in the real estate industry and asked if that was a good thing, a bad thing to do, and they both agreed that it was a positive thing for the city of Moorhead to do because it would allow the city to manage the release of those properties onto the real estate market. If they just went out with an auction, they would all could conceivably all hit the market on the same day, and it would provide a lot of difficulties for other home sales. So the Economic Development Authority approved that, or recommended the council approve it. The council, I believe, did do that at their meeting that one.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, thank you, Les. Bill, brings us down to the general manager's report.
Yeah, in the general manager's report, there's a couple items to highlight. One is that a week ago on, just a week ago on November 6th, Moorhead Public Service was in front of the Supreme Court in the state of Minnesota on its service territory case. Commissioner Ralph Maynard and I attended that meeting. Kayla Brennan, Corey Ailing from the Moran Shea firm, and Ben Thomas from the Wool Johnson firm represented us down there. Kayla, in a couple of weeks, will give you an update on everything, but just to tell you that the case is now in front of the Supreme Court. Oral arguments were heard, and I thought it went rather well. I mean, Ralph, if you want to say anything, you could definitely say something.
Yeah, it was actually quite impressive to sit there in front of the Supreme Court, and I was surprised by the number of questions they had and how informed the justices were. Of course, you can't read them, you don't know which way they're going to go, but and we don't know when the decision is going to come. It could take up to a year for the decision to come. But it was quite impressive, and we'll hope for the best. I understand it's a big case for the whole industry, usually.
Is there any other questions about that?
Not on that subject.
Okay. And then there's a number of items there, a few Missouri River Energy Services updates on some of the things that's happening there. The number 6 is the extension of the dedicated capacity agreement, and not a lot of fanfare on that one, but that is a big deal to Moorhead Public Service Commission. If you remember when we were looking at the Centennial Generating Station and we approved that as a generating station in the city of Moorhead, both for backup and for we get compensated. We have lease payments from Missouri River Energy Services. Well, the contracts only went through the year 2018, and so the commission was forced to assume that those contracts were going to go beyond that point. The board at Missouri River Energy Services has approved a 10-year extension in that. You will see extensions coming here, so we will be dealing with this in the future. But just so you know, they did approve that, so that's a good thing. Let's see, was there anything else here? I think, well, the other thing was just item number 15, the last one. From time to time, it seems like even less than a year, a yearly basis, we're telling our residents that we do not endorse HomeServe. HomeServe is a organization that repairs sewer lines, water lines, and indoor appliances. The notification that homeowners in Moorhead got this within the last couple of weeks was for water heater repair and replacement plans. Moorhead Public Service does not endorse those. I'll speak, personally, not on the record. We don't have a policy about that, but these are insurance. These are insurance plans, and for something that's very rarely going to happen. So it is something that you should really take a look at, or you should really look at carefully before you sign up for this. But everyone was notified about those. And earlier on, HomeServe was the company that made it look like the utility was endorsing it. Now they've gotten much better at saying right on there that they aren't endorsed by the utility. So that is it, Mr. President.
Okay, that brings us down to item 8D, which is to accept report number 2 on the proposed 2013 budget and discussions with the Budget Committee. And I'd asked, as a part of these discussions, that we also take a look at the city charter, at least that it be made available to the various members of the commission, since this report indicates that we are going to have yet another increase in the amount of the transfer from Moorhead Public Service to the city of Moorhead. And I think it's important for us as commissioners to understand what our charge is vis-a-vis the charter, and especially as we're having a rate hearing tonight, to understand that we have a charge under the charter that indicates that we are to raise rates based upon the operating expenses and so forth of the utility itself. So anyway, with that, Bill, I turn over the discussion for report number 2 to you, and I had asked that this come off the consent agenda so we can have a more in-depth discussion.
Well, you have report number 2 in front of you. As far as highlights to that discussion, it's well written up there. If you remember, we had a...
You would say that.
Yeah, we had a, well, it's, I'm still getting used to the surroundings here. This is just a little different than what we've been used to. And Nancy and Mark Moylanen and the rest of our staff have been working on budgets, trying to make sure that, you know, we've just checked everything and looked at everything so we can make sure that we're, you know, just got everything buttoned up. We have, however, had notification from the city that there is a increase of $70,000 to the general fund since our last meeting. So we do have additional increase above the 2% increase that's put into the plan for this time. We did not steal from any other area of our budget. We actually increased that. The other item that you need to consider and you need to look at is the Make Moorhead Home information that we've been discussing. It's attached to the item as well, and we can get into some of that discussion as well. So generally, we're looking at a 2.6% increase for electric, 2% increase in water. We'll talk about that in much more detail at the rate hearing that's coming at 5:30. Right now, and maybe the budget committee wants to talk about this first, and then I can talk about Make Moorhead Home, or I can move right into the Make Moorhead Home and talk about that.
Well, I think what we should be doing is talking about the budget, because like you said, within minutes, we're going to be going into our rate hearing, and we'll be talking about the proposed rate increases. I thought we had been looking at a 2% increase, is that correct?
That's correct.
And now we're going to a 2.6% increase? And as one commissioner, I'd like to know the basis for that. So I'd like to know where we're going with this.
And I might need Nancy to come up and help me out here, because there's, it's a 0.6% higher increase than October 23rd, you know, a couple of weeks ago. A portion of that is for the Make Moorhead Home, and a portion of that is for the increase in transfer, and I can't remember what the percentage was, so Nancy's got to help.
Thank you. Yes, our original budget had a 2% electric rate increase in it. Since that time, the budget committee has met, and we've been given additional information basically from the city of Moorhead, a couple proposals, one an optional proposal, the other, I guess, an additional request from them. But they have chosen to include in their budget an additional $70,000 transfer from the electric division to the general fund. That's going to equate to about 1/3% rate increase if we don't want to take that from our reserves. So in order to leave ourselves intact, that would be about 1/3% rate increase. The other option that's on the table that's been discussed with the budget committee and a lot of staff discussion and kind of brainstorming some ideas is the concept of participating in the city's Make Moorhead Home program. So it's an economic development program. Staff started with looking at participation in that program all the way up at I think about a $250,000 level, being creative, out of the box, but yet trying to relate those participations back to electric or water type programs that would fit with our SIP programs and things like that. We've scaled that down, and the proposal that Bill will maybe talk about in a little bit more detail is basically allocating or increasing the budget by about $125,000 annually to participate in that Make Moorhead Home program. What that would be about $200 annually in fixed fees that we would waive or rebate back to new homeowners, along with a rebate program for participating in some of our other programs. But the $125,000 commitment to that program would equal about a 0.25% rate increase. So between the city's additional request for general fund transfer at about 1/3 or 0.35, another 0.25% going towards Make Moorhead Home, that's where we move from 2% up to 2.6% on the electric.
If I can go back to your earlier comment. You made a comment that in order to avoid having to go into our reserves to meet the additional requirements.
Right, it's always, you know, we've spent a lot of time looking at that. Every year we look at it some, but basically, the way I see that things happen is that the city council sets their request, and the commission then, in order not to go into reserves to fund that request, do raise the rates to accommodate those dollars. There have been a lot of discussions about, in fact, we talked with our auditor, Brian Stavanger in the past, and our current auditor, Brian Jung, about those, and we had a lot of in-depth discussions about accounting principles, basically, and what's generally accepted, what are revenues below this line that we talk about, and below the line, above the line and below the line. And what we found, and Bill, please correct me if I'm incorrect on this, but kind of the consensus as we had a good general discussion with our auditors was that what the council really doesn't, or the charter doesn't address, is items that aren't on the income statement. So balance sheet type items such as our capital expenditures, where do those come in the equation, our debt service payments on principal, and our funding of reserves. So those are three of the items that are currently calculated, or currently we have to account for after city transfers. So the hierarchy that's been in place and that's been the practice has been revenues, operating expenses, and then city transfer, and then we have to also set rates high enough to account for debt payments, capital improvements paid out of operations, and reserves. So it's
Okay,
looking at that
without
hierarchy.
getting into an extended discussion of generally accepted accounting principles, which is sort of like hocus pocus to me anyway, you made a comment, and I want to draw this to the attention of the members of the commission. First of all, I, for one, object to us ever tapping our reserves to meet the transfer requests / requirements of the city. I'm going to start with that. Secondarily, I call your attention, everyone, to section 1204, actually 1205 of the city charter, subdivision 7, which deals with our ability to set our own rates. And we are supposed to impose just and equitable rates, which is something that we're going to be talking about in a few moments. But in allowing us to set those rates, it says, and I quote, "In determining the reasonableness of the charges to be imposed, the Commission may consider all costs of the establishment, operation, maintenance, depreciation, and necessary replacement of the utilities, improvements, enlargements, and extensions necessary to the utilities, and the principal and interest and obligations issued or to be issued by the city for capital improvements to the utilities." Nowhere in that rate-making authority do I see anything relative to the budget of the city of Moorhead. So to that extent, I don't know if it is appropriate for us to raise rates simply to make an adjustment to meet the requirements of the city. Particularly, it's my understanding that the additional $60,000, $70,000, whatever it is to meet a recently negotiated labor settlement, which should be included in their taxing authority to begin with, and should have been anticipated and budgeted for by the city staff. That having been said, I've got a problem with it. But I'm just one of five.
And I agree with you. And if you look at that same section, it talks about we can set the rates and charges for the use and availability of the utility service and public services. It does not talk about transfer. I believe, and I've said this before, that the way this has been calculated in the past is not correct. I believe the way it was set up was a profit-sharing arrangement between the city and utility, provided there was a profit. And the way we're doing it, or we have been doing it, is the city tells us what the profit is supposed to be. And I had an issue last year when we raised rates solely for accommodating the transfer. This year, Nancy, of the 2.6% is 1/4% for the transfer, or is there more for the total?
About 1%, 1.1% of the 2.6 would be for transfer increases.
So 1.1% of 2.6 would be for the transfer, and I don't see that we are actually allowed to do this. I'm with you, President, that it is not something we are allowed to do. I also agree we should not take it out of reserves. I know we'll have a discussion in about 2 weeks when we find out that the transfer for this year, we cannot meet with our current revenues because revenues are down. And I'm going to have a big issue if the proposal is going to be by the city or anybody else that we should come up with a difference by tapping into our reserves. Our reserves are for running the utility. Our reserves are making sure that when that line goes down, when we have a storm coming in, we don't look like the East Coast does 2 weeks later and we still don't have power up. This is not an operation to support somebody's golf courses. This is to make sure that our customers have service all the time. And anything that we transfer out of our funds to the city means that we can do less on that side, or we have to raise the fees for our services, which I'm having a problem with. Period.
Well, it's unfortunate we have nobody here from the city to hear this discussion, and I don't know what the rest of the commission feels about it. But let me ask you this, and we're not picking on you, Nancy. Do not take our comments as
that.
anything other than trying to get to the bottom of what we can and cannot do.
It's a difficult issue, I understand that.
Well, it really is. And the question that I have, according to the charter, we are to prepare and to provide to the city council a tentative budget, which I think we've already provided, or previously provided. And in that tentative and preliminary budget, we would have funds available for the transfer. Am I correct? And I'm assuming we did provide that to the city.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Okay. I said, according to the charter, we are to prepare a budget provided to the city council. We did that, correct?
Yes, they contact us, or we provide information probably late July, early August. And the questions that are, I mean, some of the information that's provided is, you know, what are our projected revenues for this year, for the current year, and what are projected rate increases and revenues for the following year. And what's historically happened from that point on, I believe based on those projected numbers given early in the process, I believe then the city council assigns a percentage of where they want to be for transfer and fix a flat dollar amount of transfer to the general fund.
Okay. It's sort of less?
Yeah, I look at it somewhat, a little bit differently than you do, Ken.
And I'm glad you do, and I want to hear this.
Yes. I look at what the city has as their resources. They have as their resources fees and charges for residents of Moorhead. They have as their resources anything that might come from the state. They have as their resources the taxing authority. They have as their resources money from Moorhead Public Service. And I know we have somewhere around 30 to 35% of the establishments, institutions in the city of Moorhead that are not taxed because they are nonprofits, they belong to the state, several other reasons. And I look at us as part of the solution to funding what the city is doing. And we fund it with this thing called the transfer. And the revenue from the state has gone down, as all of you know, and the city probably has to make it up somewhere. And ours is a way of doing it. I have spoken with some business owners in the community, and they have said, you know, we understand that because we look at it the fact that we may pay a little more in our utilities, but then MSUM and the churches and several other entities in the city of Moorhead are also paying an additional amount. If the property taxes went up, then only we would be paying it, and that portion of our city would not be paying for it. So I'm not as adamantly against the transfer as some of my fellow commissioners are, and we've disagreed before, and I expect we'll disagree in the future, and I have no problem with that. I won't even worry about it after tonight's meeting. So that's my perspective on this whole thing. I'm not as upset.
Okay, if I can respond a bit to that, and I agree with you that this is a means of funding the city of Moorhead for all the various things. As a matter of fact, I think that's what the design of the charter was meant to do. Where I have an issue with it though, Les, under the circumstances, is number one, that I believe that the city is looking at least by newspaper accounts, at a zero tax increase this year. And if they do have a zero tax increase, or if there is a slight tax increase, that they will offset that with a reduction in fees. At a time when we're looking now, from what Nancy's telling us, at a 2.6% increase, that's problematic to me. I think that that should be, especially in view of the fact that I perceive that certain aspects of the city are to be covered or paid for by the taxing authority. And they make a choice when they set the budget, and part of that choice is whether or not to tax, which is a deductible expense, quite frankly, to the average homeowner, as opposed to electric rates, which are not. And I'm just looking at this as to, okay, we look at our budgets, we rein in costs where we possibly can. We are criticized by the city council for the manner in which we handle labor negotiations, thinking that we spend freely, which I think anybody who knows us knows better than that. And yet at the same time, when we are looking at, we already gave a $250,000 increase as a part of our initial discussions with the city, and they want to increase that another $80,000. My problem with that is effectively then it's increasing our rates to cover what would otherwise be that portion of their budget, which should be handled by their taxing authority. To me, that is inherently wrong. I don't think that's what we're supposed to be doing. But I'm just one of five. Yo, Green.
I don't think any of us are objecting to the transfer. I just
No.
think it's getting to the point that it's out of range. I mean, it's too easy to keep increasing it. I understand why they have to have it, but when you tell me it's that percentage of our budget, that to me is a serious problem, because we have to cut on other areas to make that possible. And I think it's good we're addressing it. Thank you.
David.
I guess I'm next. Is this on? You can hear me out there. Okay. I guess in maybe direct response to Les, I've worked for a lot of nonprofits and tax-exempt organizations over the years, and it's not as if they're not taxpayers. As a matter of fact, except for the base plant of my current employer, we pay property taxes, and we pay specials and so forth on our facilities that are outside of the medical center. So if a major argument for the transfer is to collect from the nonprofits and the tax exempts, then it sounds like we're actually hitting some of them twice. The real reason for tax exemption for many of the private sector organizations is because of the community service that they do. It isn't just to give them a deal. It's because they're providing community service, which is in exchange for those community services then that the rest of us then will supply if they need them. But my real bottom line worry is that the transfer has gotten so big. It's 21% of your bill now, just on the electric side. It's over 21%. And when you look at that fund starting to surpass the property tax as a fund in the city, that's becoming a huge fund. It's really getting to the point where I really doubt that the people that wrote the charter years ago had any intention of this transfer becoming such a major source of resources for the community. And so I just come down to a real concern at this point that it's not very transparent. Nobody really knows about it except those of us that sit and deal with it, and a few people that may be watching from week to week when we start talking about transfer. But it's not very transparent. We don't outline it on the bill. They don't see that this significant portion of what they're paying is going into other city services. And I think particularly for the people that are paying their bills from month to month and wondering even how they're going to pay their bills from month to month sometimes. Those folks that are retired living in our community who are paying 21.6% more per month on their electric bill because of all of these other things that are going on. because we're trying to catch up with the nonprofits, that we're trying to get a payment from the nonprofits. I wonder if we've ever really talked to the nonprofits and the tax exempt organizations about this and about what their voluntary participation would be if they were given the opportunity to actually consider what it is that they're being provided in services and what whether they're willing to continue at this level. I hope we don't continue to grow it the way we have, because year to year, it's just guaranteed an increase because our budget and our percentages to establish the transfer are based on the prior year, and we go up every year. It goes up all the time. So it's always feeding itself, and it never seems to go down. The percentage might shift a little bit, but it never goes down. And so at this point, these many years later, we have what has become a major funding source for the city, and I just don't think the community knows that.
Well, if I might, and here's the question that I pose to the members of the commission. In years where we do not have adequate cash flow to meet the request/demand with regard to the size of the transfer, is it the consensus of this board that we are to withdraw funds from our reserves to meet the city's budget?
No, unfortunately, it's not mine.
In my opinion, absolutely not.
Okay, and so
I would agree,
as
no.
as a public policy-making board, first of all, we have asked for the opportunity to discuss the transfer with the council, and that has fallen to the wayside. We thought of the possibility of having a subcommittee, our subcommittee meet their subcommittee, and that was rejected at a meeting. And I look at, and I asked Bill to give me some information today, and believe me, I'm just, like I said, I'm just one of the 5 members of this board, but what concerns me here, there was a point in time when we were so proud of the fact that not only were we highly competitive with our neighbors with regard to electric rates, now we say we're not cheaper so much as we're competitive with those other rates. And Bill gave me a chart here, and of course I hate charts, and Bill knows that, but he gave me a chart that tracks what's happened with the utilities and so forth over the last, this goes from 2003 to the current. In 2003, our electric utility rates were 27.9% less than the average surrounding residential rates. Now we are 14.1% less. So that level of difference between our rates and our neighbors has changed, and it has not changed to the good. That's concerning to me. And in past years, at a time when this transfer continues to grow, our cash flow wavers. And one of the questions I have for you, Nancy, and maybe it's an unfair question, did you look at the city's overall budget?
I've looked at it briefly.
Let me ask you this, because I know that reserves are an important part of our discussion, certainly with our bonding agency, and they are for the city. Is the current city budget as planned with our increased request for funding from the city, does it provide for funds to go to their reserves?
I don't know the answer to that
Okay.
for sure. I know in certain areas and certain fees that they are drawing down reserves, so as we look at even some of those charges that appear on our utility bill, like pest control and mosquito control and things like that, I know that the reserves in those individual funds are large enough that they're using some of those and cutting rates in some of those fees for next year to use up some of those reserves. But the general fund reserves, I'm not that familiar with.
Last year, as we stood before members of the public and talked about our rate increase, we indicated that we were raising our rates last year solely for purposes of meeting the requirements of the transfer. Correct?
Correct.
And we indicated that we would put off certain improvements that our staff has been begging us to do for years, which we've done, and that we probably wouldn't raise solely to meet or to meet those transfer requirements in the future. if we do the 2.6% rate increase, are we not doing that? Are we not rolling back what we said we weren't going to do? And I mean, we've built in a $250,000 increase. That's already there in our preliminary budget.
Correct.
Now they're taking $80,000, $70,000 more, whatever that number is, or requesting, demanding it. I mean, how do we want to respond to this? Should we be communicating with the policymakers on this subject? Should our board be sending a letter to their board saying, hey, look, this is a concern of ours, and if we don't have sufficient cash flow to pay, it's not going to be there because we refuse to take it out of our reserves? What, I mean...
Well, Mr. Chairman, I guess that's been my question since I joined the board about 15 months ago is the whole interpretation of the charter and you know, whether this is a net accounting thing or whether this is a gross accounting thing. Because what we're doing from year to year is we're raising our rates in order to create the net or the gross or whatever the calculator is in order to pay the bill. It's described as what would seem to be a profit sharing or a sharing of a margin above expenses from the way I read the charter. But yet we have to create a margin based on an invoice that we're going to receive. And to me, that just isn't making sense. How it is that everything is at zero or worse, and we have to raise our rates then in order to satisfy this appetite. And again, what I said earlier, you know, this started out as a pretty reasonable program of sharing some funds, but it has become a huge number, and you know, from year to year it just gets bigger. And so you know, we have our own reserves policy that we have to satisfy in order to be ready for those unexpected situations. But we're having to raise rates under this budget proposal to meet the transfer. We're having to raise rates to even participate in the home program that they've offered to us. The check this year is going to be well in excess of $8 million for the combined transfers, and I just think that number would really surprise a lot of the folks that are listening. You know, that's a big check.
It is. It's our second largest expenditure. So
Yeah.
if you treat it as an expenditure or an operating expense, which we almost do,
Yeah.
because it's so large, you've got to account for it.
And we have to raise our rates to get there. And that's where it's a complete disconnect for me. We have to raise our rates to get there. It isn't profit sharing, it isn't margin sharing, it isn't anything more than having to pay a bill and raising our rates to do it.
An adder onto the rates. Yeah, at the staff level, I mean, it's a difficult question. You know, we had Springstead Financial Advisors take a look at the transfer. They called it pilot back then. Did a pilot study to try to figure out, you know, how the two bodies should work together. What should come out of this, and I think the answer in that study was it's a delicate balancing act, and we haven't figured out where that balance is yet. You know, staff has approached it and has tried, you know, on the budgeting side has tried to take the emphasis off of the percentage increase so that they're not getting additional revenue. When our purchase power bills go up $1 million, do they get, you know, another 21% of that? So do we increase on top of those type of expenditures? So we've proposed, you know, over and over a $250,000 increase in the general fund, and they automatically get an extra 5% on capital improvements. But we've tried to put plans out there. One year, I think it was 2011, we were successful in, because the increase in 2010 had been extreme, in having basically a zero increase 1 year to offset that. And, you know, over the long run, that would be our goal, would be to start minimizing those increases and work at a downwards trend on percent of revenue instead of upwards.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Last year, they mentioned a couple options that by charging the nonprofit for fire and police protection, which many cities do, could help balance this. And I know this has been mentioned to the city. Do they never discuss it? Do they never want to go to that option to try, to lighten our burden? Other cities do that.
Yeah, we've tuned into their budget discussions more than we have in the past, and I haven't heard those discussions. You know, I think there's some issues on what should be collected with property taxes and, you know, what they're obligated to collect with property taxes, but we haven't gotten into that detail with them.
Okay, I guess Rolf had a question.
Well, it's more a statement, actually, and less back to your point. I totally understand the city needs the money. Okay, there's no question about it. But we have a document to go by here, and it's called a charter. And I do believe that we are doing certain things which we are not allowed to do. I do not believe we are allowed to raise rates based on a transfer. I also believe that the way that the transfer has been calculated is not correct. I believe we have to at least look backwards. I mean, the charter talks about net and profits and what have you. I don't know what the profit is until the year is over, so I think we should talk about that. We have tried to get with the city, haven't found an interest in sitting down with us to figure out how it should be done. And I, for one, I believe it's maybe time to have somebody neutral look at the charter and tell us how it should be done. And then we sit down with the city and say, okay, this is how the charter reads, and we go forward. Because I have a problem reading the charter the way it is and making it fit the process that's currently being used. It just doesn't fit. I know the city needs the money. I know we are a city-owned utility, but here's a document that says you can do certain things and certain things are done a certain way, and I do not believe it's done the way the charter prescribes it. And I wish the city were here today, and I wish we would have a little bit more interest in the council, you know, having to sit down with us and talk about it, because it is a big issue. And if we ever go and get a third-party opinion, be it from an attorney or the attorney general, whoever it may be, we will all be bound by that, and you know, that may be the only way we can go. And as I said, I mean, the way we're raising it to satisfy the transfer, in my mind, is not the way this was supposed to be. The way that the number is imposed on us every year is not the way that this was supposed to be, and we need to look at it. I mean, that's the document we have to go by.
Notwithstanding your comment, both Moorhead Public Service and the city are barreling toward deadlines for the adoption of rates and the adoption of budgets. And I don't know how much time we have to necessarily get an opinion. Les, you had a...
19 minutes. No. For an
Yeah,
opinion, no.
yeah. I as I'm sitting here looking at this and thinking, sometimes I can do two things at the same time, not all that often, but tonight must be my day. We're talking about, what, an $80,000 increase over the $250?
Over the
Give or
$250,
take a
right,
few
right.
dollars. And I'd like to ask my co-commission members who are on the budget committee, if the 80,000 was such a difficult thing to do, why is the budget committee recommending $125,000 for the Moorhead home instead of saying, hey, our contribution is the $80,000?
That is why
Seems so simple.
you have a very good point, and that's why we put that item up for consideration, because we have, Dave and I, we both had an issue with that. And the issue is, can we actually make should our ratepayers be the ones who pay for the benefit of a small number of new homes? The reason it's on the agenda is, remember, we were asked by the city to come up with a plan to support them. And by the way, it would be an additional $125,000, of which they already got their 21% on top of it. So it's actually a higher number to begin with. That's why we looked at it. Dave and I, and we were going to talk about this in a rate hearing, or at least I was not comfortable. I understand we want more people in town. I understand that's an important thing, but I have an issue saying, okay, ratepayers, we're going to raise your rates to accommodate not only the transfer, but also an additional item to actually get more people moving to town. I'm totally with you.
Les, go ahead.
And I'm not going to argue with you, Ralph, but.
Well, I don't think anybody's arguing here.
No. My other comment that I wanted to make, I've talked to some real estate friends that I have in the community, and I have more than one friend in the community. And I asked, well, debatable. I asked those folks, okay, if somebody is going to buy a new home in Moorhead or Fargo, how many dollars would it take as an incentive on that home to change their mind from Fargo to Moorhead? And they said, oh, somewhere near $3,000 or $4,000.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned that before.
And I mentioned
Yep,
this once
you did.
before. The max you get here is $1,000. I'm not exactly sure it's gonna make a heck of a lot of difference for a prospective new home buyer in Moorhead. So, although I'm not as opposed to the transfer as I hear, I don't like this option of the 125,000, and I will speak against it. And I would like to say, hey, city, 80,000, here's our contribution.
And to make another point, Les, I mean, you're right on. What if our rates were 21% lower than they currently are? Would that get people over here? And the answer is, that may get people over here. That may get more business over here. So you know, you can draw it out. If we didn't have to pay the 21% to the city, if we could have our rates lower, would we get more pactives and more bushes here?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Would we get more homeowners here? Absolutely. And again, the reason we put it up for consideration was it was a request by the city directly.
Yeah, if I may make a comment, I, for one, am not taking the position that we should reduce the transfer to zero. Sorry, ain't gonna go there. I agree with Les. Part of our charge here is to produce money for the city. That part I don't have a problem with, and I think we've done that, and I think we've done one heck of a job doing it, even though we don't get any credit for it. Aside from that, all I'm looking for, and I've been looking for years, is a means to an end, so to speak. I would like us to come up with a vehicle whereby we mutually discuss the balancing act that has to take place with regard to this transfer fee, because it's a major item for us, which in time, if we unbundle rates, may be something that goes away vis-a-vis the city. I mean, and the city should not be banking on it like it's a piggy bank. They really, truly should not. And there may come a time when we don't have adequate funds. All I'm saying is, for right now, they can set their limits to 20% of our gross, but they have to take those funds from our net. If there's not sufficient net revenue there, to me, that means that they're not going to get everything that they want. And we have to somehow get that message to the policymakers at the city level that, hey, look, fellas, you can ask us for this amount of money. You may not be getting it. And we are not going to dip into our reserves to make your budget when we have a budget of our own to make.
If I may, Mr.
Feel
Chairman,
free.
I agree with you entirely. And
You do?
Nothing that I said earlier means that I would roll it back. I think we're way beyond that point. You know, the city is at a point where we can't do that to the ratepayers and to the taxpayers at the same time. But I think the point is really important, that there needs to come a time when we hit the ceiling, and that ceiling is fairly firm, because we keep moving the ceiling every time we move the number up from year to year. And Les, to your question very directly, and Nancy, didn't I say to you, I won't vote for an increase that's going to go to the ratepayers in order to pay for that program. You know, Dennis, I said that. You know,
Well, we sort
in
of
our
told
first
Dennis
meeting.
to go out there and find a program
Yeah,
and make it
well,
work, so.
And you know, we sat down at that budget committee meeting, and we can bring it to the whole board, but I'm not happy with this, because I
Well, we were
don't-
trying to be transparent with that too, and,
Absolutely.
you know, if they're asking for a contribution from us that's big enough to make a difference, and just be able to see the impact to that to the average customer is all we are trying to do with
So
it.
we'll see what happens with it tonight, but it's just one of those roads that I'm very uncomfortable going down now, because every time we turn around, we're raising rates to pay for this, and we're raising rates to pay for that, we're raising rates to pay for another thing, and they have nothing to do with what we're doing in delivering our own services.
Therein lies my problem, because our rates are supposed to be designed to reflect what it costs us to operate our utilities.
So, you know, if we're going to participate, and I think we already participate, we have for a long time, because we're still on the chart, we're still very competitive, but we're less and less competitive. We used to be very competitive in the marketplace. I think we could do better. Maybe we can get rid of the transfer for our commercial customers, if that does something to generate the industrial and job growth that we want. You know, maybe there are some things that we ought to be talking about with city leadership, so that we can be partners in this, instead of having this kind of a conversation where we're talking about ceilings and limitations and what it is that we can't or won't do.
Les, you have a comment?
Yeah, two other comments. I'll make the positive one first. And then
You always do.
Then the other one, and I think I brought it to this commission before. In speaking with a local electrician, he told me that he's worked in all sorts of communities, Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo, Dilworth, North Dakota, Minnesota, even down in South Dakota, and he has told me that by far the best power he works with is in Moorhead, and he wished all of his electrical service was from MPS. The second thing I'd like to say, and here I'm going to get in trouble again perhaps, but sometimes I get the feeling that the Moorhead Public Service Commission and the City Council are acting like the people in Washington D.C. where they go on TV and
Don't go there.
state their case. Now, let me finish this. They go on TV, which is what we're doing, state their case, which is what we're doing, but we don't get together and talk about it. The 8, 9, 13 of us, 14 of us, whatever there are. And I really think that is part of our issues. We 5 and those 9 ought to get in a room, and this ought to be the topic.
Work it out.
And
Mr.
do
Chair.
something.
If that was in the form of a motion even, I would second it, Les, but as you're aware,
Except I didn't make it and you can't second it.
exactly. As you're aware, we have asked the council
Yes.
for those meetings on more than one occasion, only to be told that it can't be scheduled.
That was going to be my comment. We've asked them several times if we could have a meeting and discuss this, and we do not get any response on it. Even when we asked to identify the amount of the transfer on the bills, I met with them. They're going to get back 2 years ago, never a word about another meeting. And so I don't really think it's us as commissioners that do not want to discuss this or meet with them. And thank you.
Okay, Les?
I do move that the commission direct the general manager to schedule a joint session of Moorhead Public Service and Moorhead City Council as soon as convenient, with the agenda to be agreed upon prior to the meeting,
Point of clarification?
including transfer.
Point of clarification?
Sure.
Is that to be done before the adoption of our 2 respective budgets?
No, I would not put that in there.
Okay.
Not gonna happen.
Because I'm not sure that we have the time. That's putting too much of a, yeah.
Okay.
I think perhaps early 2013, when they're doing their, well, let me finish the motion, then I'll discuss.
Okay.
I'm done with the motion.
Second.
You added that to it, correct? You don't want to put a timeline on it?
I did
at all?
not put a time, as soon as conveniently possible, I think is what I
You
said.
got 3 seconds.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second. Actually, I
Now,
think
but
I have more
I'd
than,
like to
more than one
continue my
second.
discussion.
But is there any further discussion, Mr. Bakke?
Yeah, I would recommend that Bill work with Mike and try and get it scheduled in January of 2013. But I didn't want it in the motion because that puts, some undue hardship. We want this to be well thought out prior to, we want to have a good agenda, and if that takes until the first week in February, well, then it takes until the first week in February.
If I can pose a question, Les. So far, our communications on the staff level have resulted in increased requests for a transfer with very little discussion. And what we're looking for is a meeting between the policymakers at the commission level and at the council level. Would it be more appropriate for the members of our commission to send a letter to the members of the city council requesting such a meeting and indicating that we would like this to be for the sole purpose of discussing the transfer, and to do so because of our concerns with the ever-increasing amount of the transfer and the possibility that there may be insufficient funds in the future to meet their needs? I pose a question.
If somebody wants to amend the motion, I don't care.
Okay. Any thoughts, people?
Do we need to amend?
What do we,
Maybe, let me, if I might, offer a question to Bill. What would be a more effective way to communicate this so that we can get together, get something done?
I think that'd be a good thing for you to discuss. I think it is an attention getter for the council to receive a letter from the commission. I mean,
Yep.
they are an appointed body of the council, and the appointed body is formally sending a letter. That would get my attention if I was them, versus, you know, I mean, Mike and I certainly can set up a meeting, you know, January, early February, set, you know, get an agenda arranged. We can do it either way. You know, it's up to you.
Les, yet?
I'll move to amend the motion that in addition, the chairman of the Moorhead Public Service Commission write a letter or schedule a meeting with the mayor of the city of Moorhead to establish the meeting and the agenda.
I second that.
I've got a motion and a second. First, do I have to move on the
Gotta move on
amendment?
the
On the amendment.
Okay, I have all those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. I'm going to call the question on the underlying motion. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. We've got about 3 minutes before we get into our public hearing, our rate hearing. Should we take a break?
I have a procedural question perhaps.
Yes.
The Make Moorhead Home Economic Development Draft Proposal, are we to act on that tonight or not?
I don't know that we have to act on it.
Yeah, we didn't intend to, I mean, I think the budget committee and us discussed it. We thought we would present it tonight, even maybe ask questions of anyone at the rate hearing, and just kind of have a general discussion, but no action needs to be taken until the
Okay,
budget
So
is
it's just
approved.
floating.
Do you, Dave and Ralph, have a sense of what the rest of us think of it?
Yeah, I sure do.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think, do you have a sense of how I felt that?
I was
Is there any question about the horse I rode in on? Okay. No reflection on Dennis's hard work, by the way.
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. He heard it straight from me.
Well, we told them to do it.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
Well, we're just about to 5:30.
Do you want to take action on the budget discussion, or you want to leave that open till after the rate hearing? Because you could.
We can leave it
accept the
open.
report.
We may have more discussion that comes out as a part of that.
Or do you just need to table it for an hour?
We can just accept the report.
Yeah.
Accept the report.
Could I have a motion to accept that report, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. So when we go back into our meeting, we'll take up item 11. It's just about 5:30. I'm going to read the rules because Casey has been kind enough to put these in front of me and says I'm supposed to read them. These are the Moorhead Public Service Commission rules regarding the conduct of hearings. No rate change shall be adopted by the commission unless the commission first holds a public hearing affording all affected parties a chance to participate. A notice of said hearing shall be published in the official newspaper of the city at least 14 days prior to the date set for the hearing. The notice shall indicate the purpose for, the time, date, and place of the hearing. The hearing shall be conducted by the president or a member selected by the commission. At the hearing, the commission and its staff shall present the facts establishing the need for and reasonableness of the proposed rate change. Sufficient time shall be allowed to enable all interested persons to be heard, but the commission shall determine when all relevant testimony has been presented or when testimony has become repetitious. Testimony will be considered only after a speaker has been recognized and he has identified himself. For the 30 days subsequent to the closing of the hearing and prior to the adoption of a rate change, written testimony shall be received and considered by the commission. The commission may grant extensions prior to the adoption of the rate change if it finds that additional testimony is necessary or productive. After all relevant testimony has been submitted, the commission shall adopt rates which it determines to be necessary and reasonable, including the effective date, and cause the same to be published in the official newspaper of the city. I now need a motion to open our electric rate hearing. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are now open with regard to our electric rate hearing. And I'm going to turn this over to our staff. Bill?
And I'm waiting for the screen to come alive there.
Can you see okay, Ben?
Oh, I can see. I've got it on my iPod too. So the purpose of my presentation this evening is to present the need for the electric rate increase. Yeah, that should be fine.
We haven't
Yeah.
had mood lighting before the meeting.
Yeah. Chris, why don't you do the next screen, or the next? Oh, Casey. Okay, go ahead. Okay, so first screen here is how are rates determined? How are the electric rates determined? They are cost of service based. We do cost of service studies in the electric division every 5 years or so. We actually have one scheduled for next year. We have a long-range plan when we talk about our budget, and that long-range plan has a number of forecasts in it. Our overwhelmingly largest expense is purchase power on the electric division side. We also have other operating expenditures, capital improvements, and as was discussed earlier in this meeting, reserve requirements. The commission has approved the financial strength policy, which does include some reserve requirement additions, and those are being considered with some of these increases as well. The process for our budgeting is a long process. It basically starts in August, September timeframe, when we get our purchase power cost forecasts or rate increases for the following year. Then it continues through October, November, and then we finally approve them in December. There is a proposal we will talk about in a little more detail. This is the public hearing, and then final approval comes in December. Ken?
Bill, excuse me for just a moment. I'm wondering, can we turn on any lights in the back of the room that won't affect the screen, so if anybody wants to come in here, they're not going to feel entirely intimidated about coming into a theater? Thank you.
There you go.
Is that okay?
Yes, that's better. Thank you.
Yeah, that should work.
All these engineers walking around, I'm glad to see that they are able to do that.
Okay, like I mentioned, final approval is at the last meeting of the year. I believe it's December 17th. Next screen. There's a table here, and I believe there's handouts in the back for anyone that wants handouts. What we've been discussing and what the rate proposal is here is a 2.6% increase. That could, however, go down if some of the programs that were discussed earlier today were not implemented, such as the Make Moorhead Home program. You'll see in the electric rates here, and I'm not going to go into any detail on this chart, but we've got single-phase residential customers, we've got small general customers, and then we have general service customers. Residential is, as you see there, I mean, that definition is pretty self-explanatory. Small general service is really small commercial, commercial and small industrial, apartments to up to stores and retail, that type of thing. General service is generally our largest customers, the Pactivs, the American Crystal Sugars, the Anheuser-Busch's of the electric division. We don't go into detail on the general service impacts or small general service, but we do talk about the residential customer. They will see an increase of $2.45 per month with the 2.6% increase. Of course, that'd be a little bit less, around $2 per month if we lowered that a bit. Next screen is the increase where we basically look at 2012 and then the proposed 2013 rates. So where's that $2.45 breakdown? The average customer bill in 2012 came from a customer charge of approximately $10, $9.65. An electric volume charge, if we will, or consumption charge per kilowatt hour, how much energy was used, of $85.33 for a grand total monthly bill of $94.98. Proposed in 2013 is an across-the-board 2.6% increase, which raises the total to $97.43. And that's based on 1,000 kilowatt hours per month. A lot of customers actually are less than that, so, but that's what we use for an average. So what is the rate increase funding? We've had a lot of discussion today about the transfer increase. By and large, the largest portion of that is the city transfer, $336,000 increase. We have the Make Moorhead Home participation of $125,000, and that the commission has discussed previously. Capital improvements, there's about $20 million of capital improvements over the next 5 years. A lot of that is a new substation and transmission line in the southeast portion of the city of Moorhead. It is both for growth and for reliability purposes. The southeast portion of the city is growing at the most rapid rate. The city of Moorhead did a number of increases to their capital systems, wastewater, a number of years ago. We've actually delayed ours until we could, absolutely needed them. Pactiv Corp is been expanding and demands more transformation and substation capacity down there. In addition, the southeast portion of the city is growing, so that's where those improvements over the next 5 years are coming from. As I mentioned previously, we do have the commission has approved a financial strength policy. Like Commissioner Anderson mentioned, making sure that we prepare ourselves for any future unforeseen purchase power increases or natural disasters, those types of things. So, and we are having a modest increase for funding those increases.
Bill, what does modest mean?
What does modest mean?
You have numbers up above. What is modest?
Nancy, do you remember the number for next year for the increase in?
We've got about 3 days of reserves is our target number, which is about 240,000.
Okay, so 3 days, 240,000.
Okay.
So a good number.
And we reduced that from the original budget, correct? Because we moved some of that, the money that we were going to put into reserves, into getting some of the. So we reduced the amount we're going to put in reserves. To be able to do some of the projects we wanted to do this year still. So it's a modest increase. We still are at the lower end of the reserves, but we feel that for 1 year we can probably handle this.
And the good point there too is that these plans our rates, we don't increase rates, like all in 1 year to do everything that we're looking at doing. We do phase these things over a number of years. So what you're seeing, could be, just modest increases over a number of years. So that's how we kind of look at it. We have a kind of a long-term rate plan. Okay, next slide is the where does your money go? So when we talk about the total bill, which is roughly $100, $97.43, where does that go? So we have a pie chart here, and I apologize, it's not real clear on the screen, but the big blue area is roughly half of the money on an average bill goes to purchase power, 53%. So a little over half goes to purchase power. The next largest portion of our electric bill is the city transfer. That's at 21.6%, and I think that percentage was mentioned earlier. Then we have capital.
Excuse me, we're having a discussion now, and if you have some questions, we'd like you to wait until afterwards, and we'll recognize you. Thank you. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I think we only have a couple more slides left, and then we'll answer those, I think. Otherwise, Ken, I'm fine with answering the questions as they come, because that's either way.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, we just
The question was asked for those people who are watching on television or watching on the web stream. question was asked is what the city transfer is. Bill, if you want to answer that, feel free.
Yep, well, otherwise, you've served on the Charter Commission, you certainly.
Well, effectively what the city transfer is that a certain amount of the budget of the Moorhead Public Service Commission is, goes directly to the city of Moorhead. And under the city charter itself, they have the authority, or the city council has the authority to request up to 20% of our electric budget to go for purposes of capital improvements, and then another other percentages. So what effectively it is, we take money from our budget, it gets transferred to the city budget. So when we say city transfer, that's what that is. So I hope that answers your question. Bill?
Okay, let me continue. That's the second largest item on our budget. And then if we continue around that pie, 8.8% is for capital items that are not financed. So I mean, we basically pay cash for a portion of our capital expenditures like we were talking about. And that is that portion of the pie, that green portion. Then you have salaries and wages at 8.1%. Then we wrap it all into other expenses, principal and interest, which is about 5%. And then that increase in reserves, so occasionally we have to increase reserves, that's the 1.3%. So anyway, that's just a pie chart, kind of giving you an idea of where the average customer's dollar goes. How does the 2013 rate increases compare historically? This is an interesting graph because it's got some really high years in the middle there. And then basically our increase that we're looking at this year is 2.6%, which looks very small compared to the other ones. We try and keep the rate increases down, and we try and keep them more regular, but occasionally there's times when we've had 6.5, 8, 10, and 12% increases. Generally those come from our power supplier, where we get power supply. So we buy our power wholesale from another supplier, and when they either have environmental issues that come up all of a sudden, or in the case of 2007 and 2008, there was a ice storm that took out a major section of the Midwest transmission lines, and our power plant basically was unable to get power out or get power to us. It basically ran idle for a period of 4 months, and we had to buy power elsewhere on the market, and that was a significant issue and caused significant rate increases. If we would have had a bit higher reserves, we probably wouldn't have had to pass those large increases on all in 1 year, 1 and 2 years. So that's a little bit of history there. And then the final slide basically is how do our rates compare to other utilities? And what we've done for a number of years is we just take a look at around the region here, just the metro area basically, and look at XL both in Minnesota and North Dakota, Cass County Electric, Otter Tail Power, and Red River Valley Cooperative, to see how we're doing as far as our rate comparisons. And as you can see, we're lower than some and we're higher than a couple, which is unusual for us. As was mentioned, we are trending a bit higher, and that's why we want to take a look and talk to the council about what the transfer should be. We used to be lower than everyone for a number of years. Now, as you can see, we're a little bit higher than XL in Fargo, and we're a bit higher than Otter Tail Power. And the only thing I can say is I did hear that Otter Tail is looking at an increase, so as well. So that may help us in the comparisons, but we do watch for our comparisons with other utilities because that does help us to understand how we're doing. So,
But Bill, looking at the number, I mean, I'm glad we're looking at Otter Tail and Fergus and what have you, but reality is our big competition, quote unquote, is across the river in Fargo. And reality is that we now are higher than XL in Fargo. right? I mean, that's basically how I'm reading the chart, and it was different a year ago even. So I just want to point that out as we're trying to attract new businesses to Moorhead, however we do this, but this is one of the advantages we don't have any longer.
And really full disclosure here, Excel in Fargo really doesn't add a lot of residential customers anymore. It's really Cass County Electric, because Cass County serves around the city. But Excel does compete with us for commercial and industrial loads, because they still have room in their industrial parks, and we are also higher in their industrial and commercial rates. So that is a definite concern for us. So thank you for that clarification. Final slide really is questions and comments, and Ken, I'll pass it back over to you.
Okay, at this point, Bill has made his presentation. Casey, I'd like you to turn the lights on, if you would. We usually have somebody who's in charge of lights. Apparently, he's not in charge tonight. And at this point, if anybody would like to come forward and make any comments to go on the record, I would invite them to do so. We are being taped, as you can see, and I would ask that you come up to the podium, identify yourself so that we know who you are, and so that the people at home know who you are, and we'd like to hear your comments. Does anybody want to come forward to make any comments about the proposed increase in the electric rates? I'm going to say to come now or forever hold your peace, because once we close the hearing, we'll move on to our water rate hearing. If you'd like to come forward, I would ask that you come up to the podium, please. Thank you.
The other thing, Mr. Chair, is for the next 30 days, they may submit written
Right,
comments
and I was
this.
going to say that at the end, but yes.
Anyone feeling uncomfortable standing in front of a microphone and doing the thing certainly may send paper or email to General Manager and ask your questions, and we will review those at our next budget meeting.
My name is Sandy Beckress. I'm from Village Green area. And I didn't bring with that little letter thing you sent in the mail. And I have to say that in my mind, I've got it combined, electric and water. But if we put those two together, in the middle of that, you gave a range, but in the middle of that, and I'm at the high end of both of those because I have electric heat, I'm looking at a 7% increase, which would mean $14 a month. And I just want you guys to know that when you increase it this much, I'm going to have to take that $14, $15 a month out of my food budget. That's the only money I got any waiver with, which means I can buy less groceries. I'm a single person, but I'm on a fixed income. And when you propose a rate, my only message to you is be very careful and understand that it affects people's everyday life. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we do take that into consideration, Ms. Beckress. Thank you. Does anybody else care to make any comments that they'd like to put on the record?
May I ask a question while they're thinking about it?
Certainly.
How do you determine the $97.43? Do you take the electrical usage of every residential customer, add them together, and divide by the number?
We do that. It actually turns out a little bit less than 1,000 kilowatt hours per month, but the 1,000 kilowatt hours has always been an easier number for everybody to multiply. So we do use 1,000 kilowatt hours per month. Now, in Ms. Beckerus's example, it's going to be much higher than that because they have electric heat. Right. So, yeah, so 2,000 a month. So I mean, it does vary.
Would anybody else like to come forward to make any comments with regard to the proposed rate increase? Seeing none, or hearing none, or both. As Les indicated a few minutes ago, for the 30 days subsequent to this hearing and prior to the adoption of a rate change, written testimony will be received and considered by the Commission. And we may grant additional extensions of time prior to the adoption of our rates. And I have to also say that I did pass on to Bill Schwant in the past week an email message that was sent to me by one of our ratepayers asking that we carefully examine the same things that were raised as questions tonight. And we do take all of those written comments into consideration. Those written comments do make it into our packet. We read them. We seriously read them. So if anybody out there wants to send us a written comment, feel free to do so. If you email it to one of the commissioners, we will pass it on, so it will be reviewed by all of the members of the Public Service Commission. And we do encourage people to send comments to us, particularly comments as poignant as we just heard a moment ago about the impact of rate increases on people within the community. And with that, I would take a motion to close the electric rate hearing. Is there a motion?
I move to close the electric rate hearing.
Okay. Do I have a second to that motion?
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The electric rate hearing is now closed. We will now move on to the water rate hearing. Could I have a motion to open the water rate hearing, please?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, we are now into the discussion of our proposed water rate increases. I will again turn it over to Bill, and the same rules apply. If anybody has any questions or anybody has any comments, feel free to come up after we've finished the discussion. And as Bill indicated, we've got a small crowd here tonight. I guess we'll answer questions as best we can as we go along as well. But the questions and comments raised by people in this community who are our ratepayers are important to all of us, so feel free to do so. Bill? Casey, the lights?
And as she's getting the lights, go to our website, mpsutility.com, for information on where to send comments if you have comments. There's other information on there as well about our budget and those types of things. So,
Will this presentation be on the web?
Yes, it already is.
Okay,
This-
I would recommend that you change that modest to an actual dollar amount to be consistent with the rest.
You bet.
Please.
Sounds good. Yep.
Please do so.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Les.
Okay, for our water rate hearing, I'll tell you in advance that they're similar slides, so I mean, we keep the format similar. First slide is how the water rate's determined. We take a look at all of our expenditures, all our capital improvement plans, the reserve requirements. We actually did a cost of service study this year. The commission did get to see that, so we take a look at how those costs are caused, who causes those costs, and then we determine how best to equitably distribute those out between the different classes of customers. That's in that cost of service study. Then we do the in-depth annual review, which is called our budget process, during the same 4-month process. And then we put together our rate increase proposals and have a public hearing. And final approval, again, is at our December meeting. The next two slides, one is the customer charge, and one is the volume charge, proposed rates for 2013. The average residential customer, because of our cost of service study, will see an increase of 10 cents per month. The customer charge, you can see there, the percentage increase is roughly 1%, but it's various increases based on our water cost of service study to those different meter sizes. So we have meter sizes from 5/8 inch meter up to an 8-inch meter. And for instance, a 5/8 inch meter is predominantly the existing housing stock in Moorhead. All newer homes typically put in a 3/4 inch or required to put in a 3/4 inch meter. So those are the charges for that. Next slide is the volume charge. And you can see there that we've got no increase in the volume charge to residential customers. That's because the cost of service study told us so. I mean, we did a look at who's causing the costs. A lot of residential customers are being much more efficient with their use, putting in new fixtures that save water, and so when we looked at the rates, it's like they're not causing some of the peaks that we've seen before, and so we've distributed those costs to those other classes of customers. Those other classes of customers include apartments, commercial, and industrial. So we have a little bit different classifications on the water side than the electric side. The next slide is discussing fire protection, and we are proposing to change some fees here, and some of this, I have to say, is still up in the air. We are working with the city of Moorhead to determine how we are going to move forward with fire protection charges, and you'll see on the next few slides that fire protection is addressed. Right now, we are proposing to eliminate the MPS charge called private fire protection charges. The city of Moorhead is going to eliminate the monthly 50 cents per month, City of Moorhead fire service fee. And then at this time, Moorhead Public Service has created a new flat charge based on our water cost of service study that would be applied to the different classes of customers and the different meter sizes. Next slide is basically just saying that all of these rates are going to be eliminated. And again, because of cost of service study, we basically are looking at a different way of charging for those services, and the city eliminated their 50-cent fee. Next slide.
Bill?
Yep.
Quick question.
Yep.
And it has to do with how you're netting that figure, net 15 cents per month. I see that the residential fee would go up 15 cents over the 50, but you're eliminating a city charge of what, $2.55 or so. So isn't the net, isn't there some residential savings that actually is the net figure in the bottom? I'm not tracking it, I guess.
Yeah, well, it really, as far as the net goes, and Nancy's gonna be able to help me on this one, but if I'm looking at it correctly, and you gotta look at it, the city is taking away something.
They're taking away the 50 cents,
They're
but I think what Dave is looking at is the private fire protection charge on the 2.5,
Yeah.
2-inch and 2.5
Okay.
inch, which is not going to be found in a residential facility.
Oh, okay.
Right. Thank you, Ken. Yep,
Got it, okay.
okay. So thanks, Ken, because I missed that one.
My pleasure, Bill.
Yeah, so I'm on the slide that talks about, back to the residential. So, I mean, we are looking at the residential fire protection charges that for 2012 was billed 50 cents by the city for all the classes. We are proposing 65 cents for residential, and then for commercial and apartments and industrial, you'll see those are significantly higher. But then again, remember that the private fire protection charges are going away. So this is a phased-in approach, and no one is seeing, a lot of rate shock from fire protection. So if you recall, when we were talking with the city of Moorhead regarding fire protection charges and the water rate study, we had a 7-year phase-in, actually an 8-year phase-in for these rates. We are looking at for next year having the earlier part in that phase-in implemented in our rates. Like I mentioned, though, we still are working with the city on whether that should be on our portion of the bill or their portion of the bill. The net impact, it adds 15 cents per month to the residential bill. So that plus the 10 cents is 25 cents per month. Okay, next slide is the impact to the average customer, and again, we have 2012 and then proposed 2013, and you'll see that the rates are $26.92 to $27.02, which is a 10-cent increase. However, that doesn't include the 15 cents, which is a separate charge. So the real net impact would be 25 cents per per month. So for the residential user, they're not really seeing that large of an increase on the water rates. So overall, it's a 2% increase, but for the residential customer, it's much less than that. Next slide is what is the increased funding? Again, mentioned the cost service study there, but we are in a capital improvement mode now since our bond payments are done. Our 20-year bond payments are done for the water plant. So we're looking at actually rehabbing that plant, and you can see all the issues that are related to that. Commission will be talking about those over the next few years. And then construction of a new high-service pump station, which the existing high-service pump station is from 1960. So it's 50 years old and in need of improvements.
So that's a replacement, not additional?
That's a replacement.
Okay.
And then all of this is being created with, I mean, we are going to fund a lot of things from cash in the water side, so we're not doing a lot of long-term financing. And so some of that is going to have capital project reserves, which are separate reserves from our, our days and cash reserves that we use for either holding down rate increases or natural disasters, that type of thing. So that's what the rate increases is funding. We have at the next slide another pie chart that is a little more well distributed. For the average monthly water user residential, it's about $27, $27.02, and where does that go? The and I want to say the first one and the one that's the variable cost is the 17%. That's chemicals. City transfer is 7.8%, so much lower than on the electric side. Capital items not finance is 17.6%. Salaries, wages, and benefits are 32%. Other expenses, 17%, and principal and interest payments are 8.7%. So as I mentioned, the capital items not financed is a bit larger for the water side. So that's where that goes. Again, similar to the electric side, we have the historical look at our water rate increases. And lest you think we don't have any years with no increase, we've got 3 of them on here, but generally, like on the electric side, we try and do small increases on an annual basis. We did have in 2008 a large increase. I didn't ask Chris or Nancy, what was the reason for that sore thumb large increase? Do you remember? Okay. That was back in 2008, so that was a little, was it? Okay, so distribution projects that came up. We're looking at a 2% increase for this year and the next couple of years. How do we compare to other utilities? That's the last slide. And here, similar to the electric side, we're kind of in the middle of the pack. We've got real similar to Fargo and Fergus Falls. We're quite a bit higher than Grand Forks, quite a bit lower than East Grand Forks and Thief River Falls. So with that, I think we're ready for questions, Mr. President.
Okay, I'd now like to open this to questions. If somebody has any questions or comments they'd like to make about the proposed water rate increases. Pat? Please identify yourself.
Patrick J. McCann. At one time, you were talking about raising the rates for the summer like you did it in the winter. Or is that still part of your plan
We do that
for the water?
for the water, yes.
Okay, now, if I understand right too on this, like some of your bigger counts, because they're consistent, their rate doesn't go up in the summertime?
I think the only place where we raise those right now is on the residential to pretty much make up for sprinkling, isn't it?
You can't
Right.
see it anyway.
That's included in this now? Okay.
Yep.
That's included with the commercial one, same with the city of
Okay.
Dilworth?
I don't know if it's the same as the city of Dilworth.
No, what I'm asking is, okay, if you increase our rate for the summertime, do you charge Dilworth more in the summer months? Or is they a flat same rate? I'm not asking if Dilworth, our bill to Dilworth is what I'm asking. If we charge, 5 cents for a cubic foot of water, does Dilworth get charged 5 cents? And then in the summer months, we get charged 5.5 cents a kilo for?
We charge, well, let me back up a little bit. The state of Minnesota requires conservation rates, and they did move those back a year, but we are implementing them based on what we thought, next year was gonna be the first year of conservation rates. And so for residential customers, for any usage over 150% of their winter average, they will pay a bit higher of a rate. Basically, that's to get people that are watering their lawns in the summertime. Right. And, so to encourage conservation in the summertime, the rates will be slightly higher. Now for Dilworth gets wholesale water rates from us. It's a flat amount. It doesn't have that same increase in there. However, Dilworth has to meet that Minnesota state requirement as well. They tend to follow our rates, so I would guess that they're going to be looking at or investigating that similar type of rate.
My question is then, we're not charging Dilworth for using more water in the summer. It's
Not
the
at-
same flat rate.
Yeah.
There'll be an adder for summer for Dilworth as well. And for those people out in the community, Dilworth is a bulk user of water from Moorhead, and we charge them a fee
Nancy,
for that service.
why don't
They
you
receive their water from the city
answer
of
that one?
Dilworth now.
So everybody at home can hear you. Good question.
Thank you. The rates that are proposed on water will be seasonal rates for all customer classes. The residential rates will actually have two components to the seasonal. The first part of the seasonal rate for the residential customer will be they'll pay one rate for up to 150% of their winter usage, and then there'll be another higher rate for anything above 150% of their winter usage. The other categories, so apartment buildings, commercial customers, industrial and regional, which would be your city of Dilworth, are all going to a seasonal rate. So what's happening is the rates in the winter are dropping slightly, and the rates in the summer are increasing slightly. Again, the categories, the commercial and industrial, as we talked about, the cost of service study, those are going up slightly more than 2%. Dilworth's is actually, or the regional rate is about where it is, so they will see a very slight change in their rate, but they will have seasonal added into that as a component.
Does that answer your question, Pat?
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks, Nancy.
Thank you.
Any other? Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? If there are no further questions, we'll close the water rate hearing. Any questions? Any comments? The question was raised earlier about what the transfer was, and just so that you understand, you weren't here for the earlier part of our meeting, but the transfer that we currently make to the city of Moorhead is approximately $8 million a year. And we try to manage that as best we possibly can.
It goes to the city, right?
Yes, it does.
Projects they're doing it. So as citizens, we don't have any knowledge of where that money is.
The question that Mrs. Beckeris is asking is, as citizens, we don't have any knowledge where that is going. The city provides its own separate budget, and in all honesty, we don't even know where the money is going. And they take the fund from us and use it as the city sees fit. So, but that's what the transfer is all about, and it's about $8 million a year. Okay, there's no further questions or no further comments with regard to the rate hearing. I'm going to read this. First of all, I'd like to have a motion to close the water rate hearing.
I move we close the water rate hearing.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. The water rate hearing is now closed for this evening. Written comments will be received for 30 days from the date of this hearing, and no action will be taken on the rates until 30 days from the date of this rate hearing. For comments to be considered by the Commission, written comments should be postmarked no later than Thursday, December 13th, 2012, and mailed to the Moorhead Public Service Commission at P.O. Box 779, Moorhead, Minnesota 56561-0779, or email to mps@mpsutility.com. For written comments via email, Please include "Attention Moorhead Public Service Commission" in the subject line of your email. And as I mentioned earlier, for those people who email any one of us, your comments will be brought forward to the commission in its entirety. A formal decision regarding MPS's 2013 rate structure will be determined at the commission's meeting on or about December 18th, 2012. Any additional information on our proposed budget and rates is available at our website, which is www.mpsutility.com. For those of you who attended tonight, I want to thank you for coming to our rate hearings. And with that having been said, we're going back to our regular meeting of the Moorhead Public Service Commission, which brings us down to item 11. Bill, we have nomination of Commissioner Corrine Stephenson to the APPA Policymakers Council, and I believe the same may be said of Les Bakke.
Yes, so we have two commissioners interested in the American Public Power Association Policymakers Council. The Policymakers Council gets together and forms position papers and advocates on public power issues. They like to have commissioners and former commissioners be a part of that. Missouri River Energy Services encourages that as well. They provide letters of support, and they also reimburse for travel arrangements for those policymakers councils. I'm looking here. I believe they meet a couple of times a year and then a couple times by conference call. And they do it in conjunction with like the APPA National Conference. And they also, I believe, like them to go to the legislative conference as well. So I think there's one that's concurrent with the national, but then there's another one that's kind of independent on its own. So it's a good group. Right now, there's not actually a vacancy within our region. However, they do encourage you to, they encourage people to sign up, and then if they have vacancies in other regions, then they'll place these people in there on a one-year basis, and then at some point they can get appointed to our region's vacancies or positions.
Okay, and Corrine has thrown her hat in this particular ring. Les, were you looking at doing the same?
Not for this one. There's another opening that is a real opening for one of the subs of APPA. And I sent that to you and to Bill, and I'm interested in doing that. The nominations have to be in by February 1st. It's DEED, and I can't remember all of what DEED stands for.
Yeah, that's a good board.
It's also a great
Looked
subcommittee.
extremely interesting as well.
Yep.
And I would
Okay.
be willing to be nominated.
Well, that would be a different nomination to a different APPA board, but none less important. We're DEED members, and DEED stands for Demonstration of Energy Efficient Developments. And they do a lot of grants to college students, and they also do grants to utilities that are doing energy efficient developments. So,
Oh, well then, since we only have one person up for nomination tonight, could I have a motion to approve this nomination?
I move to approve the
Second.
nomination of Corrine.
Okay, and I've got a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. Corrine, we wish you the best. We'll sign your letter. Okay. I don't believe we're going to an executive session this evening. And for the public, upcoming meetings, the Moorhead Public Service Commission will meet on November 27th and on December 18th. There are some MPS-related meeting opportunities for the members of the commission. I would ask that they take a look at those. I would like to have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.